Welcome to The Pulse with Lauren Baingo, a DLL podcast series. This is your place for tips, trends, and insights into the world of healthcare finance. Now, here's Lauren.
Welcome back. I am joined today by Jeff Ray. Jeff is our head of public finance. Jeff, welcome. Can you maybe introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your role.
Sure. Thank you, Lauren. It's great to be here. I'm responsible for the delivery of our company's public finance product. And public finance is state and local government financing, and we support customers throughout the entire United States. I've been in the public finance industry for over 40 years now, including the last 17 years here at DLL. And my specific responsibilities, I'm responsible for the pricing, structuring, and the origination of a particular type of financing contract with a particular type of customer. And that's a public finance agreement with the state and local government customer. So it's been a great experience and career for me, and I've enjoyed our practice here at this company.
That's awesome. And I love working with you. You've taught me quite a bit about public finance. But, for those who maybe don't know, I know you mentioned state and local government, but within that, who's eligible? Is there anything that our people should know, when they're thinking about, hey, is my customer eligible for public finance?
That's a great question and a great place to start. Eligibility goes to being a unit of state or local government in this country, in the United States. And it specifically excludes agencies of the federal government, the U.S. federal government, but all of the 50 states and all of the various governmental units inside those 50 states are eligible types of customers. Just for example, we're talking about the state governments themselves, cities, counties, townships, all sorts of entities of that nature. And probably
what about
of the
like
most...
a
Go ahead.
county hospital?
Exactly. That's where I was going to head. In the healthcare industry, we're talking about there's hundreds, if not thousands, of hospitals that are owned by municipal governments across the country. They can take the form of municipal-owned, county-owned. Sometimes they're hospital districts, but they're public facilities owned by the taxpayers of the communities that they serve, and they're there to support the healthcare mission in that community.
Amazing. And then on the flip side, what about like state universities? Because we see them too, right?
Exactly. Universities have a broad mission, and so we touch them in a number of different areas. It could be for a teaching hospital facility associated with a state university, or a particular research department or specialty department where they have instrumentation that's necessary to support their research mission. So there's a lot of different areas in which public colleges and universities come into our world in public finance.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So now that we've talked about who is eligible, let's talk a little bit about the deal specifics. Because if I recall correctly, the deal must be dollar out deals. Is that correct?
That's right. There is an elaborate section of the Internal Revenue Code that we and our customers have to comply with in order to be eligible for this sort of financing. And the good way to remember it is that it needs to be a customer-owned asset that they're using in the delivery of essential services in their mission of serving their communities. So to be a customer-owned asset, it needs to be a capital lease. So the buck-out structure that you're talking about is exactly the way it's characterized. The customer purchases and owns the equipment, and our financing really works more like a loan than a lease. It's still called a lease, but if you think of it in terms of a loan, that's usually a good way to understand it, since the customer is the owner of the equipment and we're the provider of financing.
And I think you taught this to me at one point, but one of the main reasons for that is that the exemption, the tax exemptions, right, transfer directly to the customer.
That's exactly right. My industry exists, this product exists because the customers that we're talking about are exempt for most levels of taxation. There are exceptions in a few states where sales taxes do apply, but for the most part, using our product is the one way that these customers can take the best economic advantage of the fact that they're an exempt customer.
So tell me, what trends are you seeing in the healthcare industry right now? Anything worth speaking about?
I think so. Probably the biggest thing that we've seen in the last couple of years is, well, let's go back before that time. For most of my career, financing in the healthcare industry was, here's a device, here's an instrument, we want to purchase it, we want to pay for it over time. In the last couple of years, it's grown to be more software oriented. Just like technology is changing throughout all of the various industries, in the healthcare industry, there's really no exception. So we're financing more software applications, which are used to either enhance the use of the device or the instrument, or to gather and tabulate and analyze the data associated with the diagnostic procedure or the analysis that was done. So we're doing a lot more what I would call soft cost or soft asset financing in the last couple of years, and that's where the trend seems to be going. Not that the instruments aren't important, but that the software that accompanies it probably has become even more important.
And you can finance that.
You can. Our financing is limited to what the Internal Revenue Code calls assets, and assets has a fairly broad definition. It's what you would normally think of, equipment and things of that nature, and all of the costs associated with putting that equipment in service. So you're think installation, delivery charges, setup charges, training for personnel to use the instrument once it's there, and also the software. Now, software has a whole new evolving section of the law that we're dealing with. And basically, it has to be an asset that the customer is also going to put on their books as a capital asset. And so our documentation contains some representations to that effect. Yes, you're buying this, you're treating it as an asset, which then allows us to comply with the laws and include it in a tax-exempt financing.
That makes sense. Now, in terms of the process for a public finance customer, is there anything very different than say a regular retail process? Is there anything? They still go through credit review, they still get the document package, we still issue a PO, is that right?
Almost all the steps of the process are exactly the same, Lauren. The one slight difference is since our company in this role is providing financing and not purchasing equipment, we don't issue a purchase order to our vendor partner for the equipment or the asset that the customer is going to end up purchasing, owning, and using. But other than that, the process remains the same. We do have different documents that we use, and we provide notification and assurance that everything is in order with the financing agreement. We have a pseudo purchase order, if you will, that takes a few different forms to satisfy each of our vendor partners' needs. But we don't issue a true purchase order because we can't be the owner of the equipment even for a moment in time.
That makes complete sense. But
Right.
We still notify them that we're going to do the financing and that the customer's been approved.
Right, that the customer's credit approved, the customer has signed the documents, and we have everything, other than the completion documents, the acceptance certificate and things of that nature. So we issue a placeholder for the purchase order, but don't actually become the purchaser or owner of the equipment.
Makes complete sense. So before I let you go, any nuggets, whether it's public finance related or just financing related, any nuggets you'd like to share to our listeners on things that you'd suggest they think about or do or try?
I think the biggest piece of advice I would give is don't be afraid to contact your financing provider early in the process. And by early, it's like I'm talking about when you're thinking of prospecting them for the sale. Because sometimes we've had situations where our partners have assumed that a particular entity was eligible for public finance because it really looked like a public entity. But then upon a little bit of deeper examination, we learned that it wasn't, or the other way around for that matter. You may not know that your customer is eligible for this sort of economic benefit in their financing options. So checking with us early is probably the biggest recommendation I would give, because you don't want to start down the wrong path one way or the other, either not offering the customer the most economic solution that you can, or thinking that you can and then later only learning that they're not eligible for this sort of procedure. That's probably the thing that I've seen bite folks a couple of times by not checking early enough, and that would be my biggest recommendation is you're not wasting our time. That's why we're here. We want to help you get started down the right path and help the customer afford as much as they can.
Absolutely. Talk to us early and often.
Early and often, exactly.
I love it. Jeff, thank you so much for being here. This is awesome.
Well, great.
Really
I've appreciated it, and hopefully this is helpful.
Super helpful. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Pulse with Lauren Baingo, a DLL podcast series. The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the participants. Nothing herein should be construed as legal, tax, accounting, or investment advice. Join us again for the next edition of The Pulse. And thanks again for listening.